In 1971, a man named Thomas drove through the rural backroads of Oregon on his way home after visiting his sister. It was a dark and rainy evening, with only the dim headlights cutting through the thick fog. He had made this drive dozens of times, but tonight something felt off. Around 10 p.m., Thomas spotted a man walking along the side of the road. He was soaking wet, wearing a trench coat and no hat. Thomas slowed down and offered him a ride. The man climbed into the car without saying a word, simply nodding his thanks. As they drove in silence, Thomas couldn't help but glance at the man from time to time. He was pale, and his clothes looked old-fashioned, as if he had stepped out of a different time. When they passed a small clearing in the woods, the man suddenly spoke, his voice a whisper. "This is where I need to go," he said. Thomas stopped the car, confused. There was nothing around but trees and darkness. The man opened the door, stepped out, and vanished into the woods without another word. Thomas sat there for a few moments, his heart racing, before deciding to drive off. A few days later, curiosity got the best of him. He told a local about the strange man, describing the location where he had dropped him off. The local's face grew pale. "That man died there 50 years ago," he said. "He was hit by a car while walking in that same spot." In 1994, Emily was a young college student living in a small off-campus apartment with her roommate, Julia. The place was old and had a few quirks, creaky floors, drafty windows, but they loved its charm. However, things took a turn after they came back from winter break. Emily started hearing strange noises at night, like soft footsteps just outside her window, but whenever she looked, no one was there. At first, she thought it was her imagination or maybe some animal. But one night, things escalated. Emily woke up in the middle of the night, her heart racing for no reason. She glanced at her window and froze. There, outside the glass, was a dark figure, barely visible against the night sky. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but she could feel its gaze on her. Terrified, she screamed for Julia, who rushed into the room. By the time Julia arrived, the figure had disappeared. They checked outside, but there were no footprints in the snow, no sign that anyone had been there. Over the next few weeks, the figure appeared more frequently, always just outside the window, always watching. It never came inside, but its presence was unnerving enough that they eventually broke their lease and moved out. Years later, Emily found out that a previous tenant of the apartment had been stalked by a man who would stand outside her window at night. The tenant had eventually moved away, but the man was never caught. In 2003, a woman named Claire went hiking in the mountains of Washington state. She often took solo trips to clear her mind and enjoy nature, but on this particular day, something felt off. The forest was unusually quiet, and the air felt heavy. As she made her way deeper into the woods, Claire suddenly heard a faint voice calling her name. It was distant at first, but unmistakable. She stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding. No one knew she was out there. The voice called again, a little closer this time, and it sounded just like her mother's voice. Confused and a little scared, Claire shouted back, "Mom!" But there was no response, just silence. She looked around, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from, but saw nothing. She knew it was impossible. Her mother was hundreds of miles away. Despite her instincts telling her to leave, Claire took a few cautious steps toward the direction of the voice. As she walked, she heard it again, this time much louder and clearer. "Claire, come here." The tone was strange, flat, emotionless. Something about it made her skin crawl. Claire didn't wait any longer. She turned and ran back to the trailhead, not stopping until she reached her car. Later, when she recounted the story to a park ranger, his face grew serious. He told her about a local legend. Something in those woods could mimic voices, drawing people deeper into the forest. Many hikers had gone missing and their bodies were never found. If you like this video, like it and subscribe to my channel.